report for the evening.
We're gonna try that too.
Yeah.
I hate to tell you, but Round Rock just, are we on? Round Rock just approved 475 affordable housing apartments.
Yeah.
Through the same program that.
They have quite a few.
475.
Is our mayor going to be here?
He'll be here probably at 5.
At 5.
That's about as early as he can.
You ready, boss?
Today is his last day of 7 weeks of training.
Oh, I thought it was his last day.
Last day.
Let's get it on.
Good Lord willing, I think he lives to tomorrow, but I can't make any guarantees on that.
We'll just have to wait and see.
What's up, David?
Hey.
You doing all right, bud?
Oh, yeah.
How's mom?
Wait, I'm Sandra.
He gives us a booklet and he gives us this.
Are you ready? Dave.
You just cannot give us enough stuff.
Hey, you know, hey Josh,
No, she's not.
you give us a booklet
She
and
just
then you
can't
give us
get hooked
this.
into anything today. They changed
No? Is that the June financials?
Yeah.
She can turn the,
I already printed that out, right?
now she can't get into the door to turn on the mic.
He probably was.
I think she's all keyed up.
I did. Thank you.
She might be, you never know.
Yeah, we got the lines being laid.
Supplemental.
No problem.
Keep adding in.
No
Plus
problem.
some holes in there.
Yeah. If I had known it was from Star, I wouldn't have
I
questioned
mean,
it.
because I'm the custodian.
Okay, I love
Joan was
you.
there.
I love you,
I
Star.
was there as kids.
You're looking after me, baby.
No, they met at the same time.
Oh, that's why y'all weren't there.
We were late. We came.
Yeah, I saw you at the end, but
We were late.
Oh.
Call to order this special called city council meeting of the Lago Vista City Council on Thursday, July 19th at 4:32 p.m. Please note that all members are present except for the mayor, who should be arriving shortly. We also have present the financial officer and the city secretary, the police chief, IT,
Development services.
Development Services, and the director of the golf course. We pledge?
Whatever you'd like to do.
Well, we'll wait and do it later. We're gonna have to do it again later, aren't we?
Right.
Yep. Whenever you're ready, Josh.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. What we're discussing today is we're kicking off the budget season for our city. Hopefully you have your budget document that was delivered a couple weeks ago. What I want to do is just look at a couple sections in the budget document, talk for a minute about the purpose of what we'd like to see council do as we go through this process to adopt a fiscal year 19 budget, and then start with some questions and directions. And ultimately, by the end of the night, we develop step 2 of our process so that we make sure we're following everything as council would have us follow. The budget document is divided into some subsections. The first section is probably most important. It's the area in which I write aimlessly for a few pages, and you get to read it and understand everything that's in that budget. The second section is a 10-year financial analysis. That document is an Excel spreadsheet which breaks down the audited numbers for the past 10 years. This one actually has 11 on it, but there's 10 years of numbers provided for council so that you have a reference document that can be used quickly to look at numbers for the past 10 fiscal years and use that as we plan for the upcoming years. After that, we finish up with the community support section. That community support is just important because we have a lot of agencies that ask us, how does the city give back to other agencies? For example, we provide dollars to the Chamber of Commerce for their operations for the year. We also have festivals that we contribute to. I think that's an important area for us to look at just in terms of giving back to the community. After that section, we go into the consolidated statement. That's typically what you're going to see every month. You receive that via email from the finance department that shows you where we're at right now as compared to year-to-date budget and monthly financial reports. That puts everything into it. Following that section, you have budget summaries, which is each department broken down by fund for the projection for next year. At the top of those pages, you do have comparisons to the previous years and for budget versus actual. The next section is the debt service section. That section explains to you how our debt service payment is roughly $2.6 million, why it's $2.6 million, and then how we plan on paying $2.6 million next year. There's a report in that document that shows how the debt service, which is plus or minus $35 million at the current date, how we plan to pay that over the life of each individual bond. And it'll show you that our annual payments basically do not eclipse $2.6 million at the current pace that we're at. Shows you the payoff schedule. Very important for how we look at how we're spending dollars long term. And then the last section included in this document is the capital improvement program. That document is something that comes to you in a draft version and will be discussed throughout our budget period. We're actually going to take one section where we in detail talk about the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, and what our goals are for projects moving forward. For example, if we were deciding to build a new building, we would discuss how we would build that, what funds would be provided for that, new construction, and then what time periods that new building would be completed. And it would also include the steps leading up to the construction. So engineering, design, development, fund acquisition, construction, closeout, use. So that's what we want to build on our CIP moving forward. We have a document that we presented to you that is similar to the documents been used in the previous years by the council and by the staff. What we want to do is update that. So we've given you the draft so that you can see some of the existing projects, and then we'll update that before we adopt our budget officially by September. The new fiscal year begins October 1. We will have our budget adopted by the end of September so that we are in compliance. Questions on the format that we have presented in front of you? Okay, great. There's a couple things when you open your book to that first page. The presentation gives you previous budget years and an overview of those budget years. Our goal there is to allow you to look at overall trends in expenditures. Each of those sections, it's listed out as fiscal year 2015, 2016 review. You'll see that shows you the overall budget for that year as audited was $19 million. Then it breaks it down, the revenues, the expenditures, and then the fund balance or the reserves for the two main funds, the general fund and the joint utility fund. The next little section shows you the FY17 year, and then that next section gets into the explanation of the FY18 year, which is the current year. Then you'll follow the budget into what the proposal is for FY19. In that message, we do lay out the plan that we presented the FY19 proposed budget, and we've presented an FY20 proposed budget to begin the process of long-term planning. A point of reminder, next year we intend to propose the 3-year budget. And so that's our goal. This year, we didn't put a lot of time into the FY20 projections, but we put that out there for you in a generalized scope so that you can start seeing how those numbers are going to work. And if you look at the FY19 and potentially the 20, we'll see how our revenues and expenditures are going to look after a 2-year period in case we jump into budgeting for larger projects in the CIP program. As you flip through those pages, there are a few areas that we talk about philosophically. One of the main things that you'll see is the opportunity to pay off debt, both short-term and long-term debt. As I've already mentioned, the city holds long-term debt in the amount of $35 million plus or minus dollars. What we are looking for council to make the decision is how do we want to handle the long-term debt? Do we want to go out and look at additional bonds? Do we want to focus on maintaining where we're at now with our bond capacity and start paying that off to get to a certain point? One of the questions that I ask in the message is, what's a happy place for us with our bond debt? Is there a number that the city feels that we should be at moving forward to maintain fiscal responsibility and good leverage? Hopefully by the time we adopt a budget, we'll know what our number is moving forward as a city. The other side of that was the short-term debt. One of the things that I proposed in this budget after talking to staff and to council is paying off the short-term debt items. That's typically all those items that are vehicle and equipment related that we would have 3 to 5 year bank loans with. That number comes in at approximately $800,000. One of the things I would like for us to discuss as a council is, do we want to continue to carry the short-term debt, or do we want to pay off the short-term debt? And the proposal is, if we pay off the short-term debt, to use the revenues over expenditures in the current year to pay those items off. And so that's a major topic that I want us to address during our workshop discussions. Next area that's brought up is the tax rate. The tax rate's a very integral part of the budget every year. What we've proposed for next year is to maintain the existing tax rate at 65 cents per $100 valuation. If we do that, it'll be the 6th straight year of operating with that tax rate without a tax rate increase in our city. You'll see on page 8 the projections, revenue projections, and then on page 9 and 10, you'll see some additional supporting documentation from Travis County, which basically shows how we're going to use the tax dollars if we bring them in at that rate. Page 8 shows you that the proposal for FY18 would use 0.4423 of our tax rate for the sinking fund for our debt service, and it would use 0.2077 of the tax rate for the maintenance and operations. That's a flip from previous years where we've put the majority of our tax rate into the M&O and the minority of that rate going into debt service. The whole budget message here is we have growth, and with that growth, we have that opportunity to focus on using the taxes, the ad valorem taxes, to pay our debt service payments instead of using, as previously we've done, using larger dollars from joint utility fund and from the impact fee fund. This proposal takes $0 out of the impact fee next year to pay our debt service payment. So the proposal is leaving that rate at 65 cents per $100 evaluation.
Are we supposed to ask questions or wait till the end?
Anytime, sir.
Are any cities of our size in the region operating an O&M budget at around 20 cents?
That would be a great question to have beforehand. We haven't done research on those to prepare the document, but we'll gladly.
It seems low, is what I'm asking.
I agree. I think it will be incredibly low, and that's part of that question of, if we're going to carry that debt service, how do we plan on paying the debt service? But the proposed budget says we can still maintain our operations at that level based on the level of growth that we have at this point. But I will clarify for the region.
My gut says it's too low for operations. I mean, that's like a super squeeze. I'm all in favor of reducing debt, but when you start squeezing operations, you start cutting it to the quick, and it really starts hurting operations. And then the other question was back on the debt question. I had asked you to see if, when the bond folks were here, water treatment plant was funded for 20 years, and maybe it should be 30 years. I don't know if you had a chance to get that answer yet or not, but maybe we need to look at dropping the debt service by extending the life of large assets that we know are going to last 30 years. Let the future folks that move here help us pay for it, and not today's residents paying for it.
And we did ask that question. We can easily extend that 20-year note out to the 30-year, and they are going to get us numbers.
There's a cost associated with that.
There is.
But I don't know how much it is.
They're going to give us the full breakdown of what the new payment plan would be, and what the interest would be on it as well. The idea of paying off things over 30 years on the longer projects like a water, wastewater, or other infrastructure projects makes sense, because the life of those services can be expended over that time period. My thought professionally is that if we're able to pay off some of these items beforehand, we effectively reduce our debt so that when we want to accumulate new debt, we have that capacity. But either way, we can definitely make it work.
I guess my strategy is that would be good debt, that you have a revenue stream and you'll have a revenue stream 30 years from now to pay for it. Bad debt would be things like Randy's house, the Otwell house. That's bad debt because it's money spent and there's no real revenue generating from it to pay off the debt. It's paying off some operational costs, but it's not paying any debt costs.
This budget does not include the purchase of any new houses or golf courses, just to make sure it's clear.
Okay, well, I didn't see that noted.
It's not, one thing for sure, and I appreciate the comment about operating with a lower percent of our tax rate going to management or maintenance and operations. The one thing is, we can still provide for the same level of services with an increase over the existing year using that dollar figure. So we're not cutting back our service delivery at all in this proposed budget for next year just by using a larger percentage for debt service. What we're actually doing is maintaining the efficient growth of our operations based on the population growth, and then there still may be some dollars there left on the table.
Well, there's a sweet spot or a balancing point between debt and operations, and I'm still trying to figure out whether it is. 20 seems rather low. I don't know of any city that's operating at 20 cents, to my knowledge, in the region.
Ms. Ray, wouldn't it be important to know what those rates represent in real dollars? I mean, if our ad valorem taxes happen to be a large amount compared to what we've seen before, then the M&O being at that smaller rate may not be as significant as it might have been in years past. So I think it's important to know what we expect those real dollars to be. That, to me, would be a little bit more important than what the actual rate is.
Well, the rate is a reflection of the dollars. It really doesn't matter which one you're going to get to the same point.
Well, but the point is if you're talking about 20% of $10,000, that's a different figure than if you're taking 20% of $2 million. So depending on what the amount of money that we're actually seeing collected in ad valorem taxes, that would be important to know so that we can look at those rates and see what really makes sense.
But just as a reference point, 3 years ago, we were sitting around 28 cents. Now it's 20, so you're probably about a third,
Yes, sir.
lower.
Yes,
But
sir.
we've
But we're also
increased.
We've grown, yeah,
The ad valorem's increased more than 8%.
and it's going to continue to
Well, the
grow.
growth from last year to this year, as you see on that page 9 and 10, you go from projected out $805 million on the valuation of the city to $934 million on the valuation of the city.
Right.
Only $57 million of that is new growth. The other is the valuation process. So when the final numbers come out, there will be a little fluctuation, but there's still significant growth. And one of the things that you see from the June financial statement is the incredible economic impact that the FY18 budget is experiencing based on all of that growth, those new dollars that we haven't had in the past. So I totally understand the point, and I'll pull those numbers just to show regionally where we're at, and then we can present that back.
If I can add just a little bit here, I looked at the annualized increase from those 3 years that have been presented, and it looks to me as though the increase has been $82.8 thousand per year. So if that continues, I think that's an important thing to consider as we move forward.
That's really not a lot of money.
$83,000.
No,
I mean, that's the increase.
total.
That's the increase that has occurred every year.
Correct. That's really not a lot of money in the big scheme of things.
Well,
It's money, I get that, but what I'm saying is we spend far more than that on one or two items in the budget.
Josh, I'd like to get back to a root question that may help me evaluate some of the discussion that we're having. The last time Tom Lawrence was here talking about bonds and redistribution of our debt, he let us know that we had maintained our bond status, but he seemed a little hesitant on that. I'd like to get some advice from him on, when we talk about our debt tolerance level and our pay down rate, I'd love to have his input on where we need to be to ensure that if we do need to acquire emergency funds, we can maintain that high bond level status.
We will do that. We did have informal discussions after his last presentation, and he did say we can maintain $35 million a year, as you're alluding to, but he was hesitant. We're hesitant because we say that that level is seemingly higher than where we're at in terms of what we have in the bank. One thing I want to point out is what we talk about in this message is the ability to develop a healthy fund balance, a reserve for both the general fund and the joint utility fund, so that if catastrophic happens and we need 3 to 4 million, we can handle that. Catastrophic happens and for some reason we need 10 million, we know we can't handle that. We do need to go back out.
And yeah, that's where my hesitation comes from, because Mr. Lawrence seemed, when I pushed on him a little bit around that catastrophic environment, it did not appear that we would be able to maintain a high level bond rating in that circumstance.
So that sounds like the debt service may be too high.
I agree. I think that the debt that we, I'd like to get advice from him on an ideal place for us, so that if we did for some reason need to go out and get a $10 million bond, that we would be okay.
So, a quick question. My last memory of that kind of situation was when Melissa was here, former Mayor Mitchell and Tom, they'd all got on a call with the analysts talking about our bond rating, and they came back saying, we achieved the same bond rating as we had before. And I didn't see any hesitation in that. In fact, it seemed rather jovial about the fact that we're doing well. And so I don't remember.
The last conversation we had was around the issuance of bonds with Tessera and Lakeview and what that would do to our ratings. So this would have been what, Josh, you were with us at that point, I believe.
Yeah, that was earlier this year.
Yeah, it was earlier this year.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
this was six months ago or so, and he
Okay.
seemed a little more hesitant. He didn't say anything.
Right.
But, his body language and stuff. So
Okay.
I would really like to get some advice on what that best point for us is.
Got it.
And Councilor Sullivan, if we look at that page 22 that has that financial analysis, even going back a couple years, we see that the total debt to the city in FY13 dropped down to $21.5 million. That's when it started to go back up after that, based on demand of what we needed to do, of course. But we went from that period back up to 27, 29, 31, 36, and now
Sure.
down to 35. So just a few factors, same as our factors that impact our utility side in terms of rates, that we just need to reconsider to make sure that you have all the information you need when we're looking at that healthy level of indebtedness.
But would it be accurate to say that growth in the total indebtedness was in large part due to the water treatment plant 3 and the costs associated with it?
And the new CIP that we issued.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a couple things there that tie into it, but it's spot on. That water plant's a big issue, and that's something that you have to have, and that's part of what Councilor Smith is saying. That's the long-term debt, which is effectively good debt, because that
Right.
plant should last a lot longer than 30 years.
Right.
Or else we'll be angry.
While you're talking about that, we had been on a plan to raise water rates 4% a year for 7 years. And since that time, we've added in, what's not included in that number is the Otwell House and the $8 million of bonds that was let 2 for general, 6 for utilities. And I didn't see any place in there where we have to make that first payment for that debt, which would be the $400,000, I believe, for the house and
I
the.
thought we incorporated that into the redistribution when we issued the new bonds a year ago.
The refinancing.
The refinancing.
To extend out that debt.
You are correct.
Yeah.
That was
We
That
did.
picked up the $8 million?
Yeah.
Yes, as I understood it at the time.
Because you see, the Otwell House went out to 20 years and and we had the sewer plant go out to 30. And I remember that the bond guy was kind of like, well, I've never been asked that before, and so I had to go back and figure it out. And that's where I was trying to make sure all of our long-term assets were paying for that time frame, because I don't want to pay off the water treatment plant 3 debt and then die, and the guy that moves in behind me, he gets
it for free. Yeah.
So I'm like, that's what I'm worried about.
If you die, we will charge people something. But don't die. It's tricky.
Well, that was kind of where I was going.
And that, Councilor Smith, that hit exactly on the rates as well. One of the challenges we have now without doing the rate study this year, which we are requesting to do a rate study update from the 2015 and 2016 update, is to factor in the growth and the new bonds. So both of those numbers aren't in there. So although the new debt has not been included into the rate study, neither has the growth factor been included in the rate study.
That's true. I guess where I was going with that was last year, I believe we had to make our first payment because it's always delays a year because of the refunding that takes place.
It was in the refinancing package. I
And
feel
that
confident.
pushes it out a year. And then, I guess where I was getting to was I think last year Kenneth paid that first year installment out of impact fees. And so,
We actually extended both the tax notes, the 2.2 million tax note and then the 3.78 tax note that went to the Otwell property were both extended into separate 20-year bonds.
So if you, at the very back of the budget book that he sent out to you, we've got every one of those amortization schedules for those bonds. In the 2016, I think it's B, the taxable one is the Otwell property.
What page is that?
Page 56 of the budget.
for some reason, it seemed that we hadn't accounted for the $8 million.
The 8 million was all of the new loans that we did on all those new 13
Correct.
projects. It didn't have anything to do with the refinancing. Those were all brand-new projects that we started. But the refi was in between that, and that's when we did the two tax notes, and they're 2016A and 2016B.
Right, I do remember the house was on a 2 years interest only and a 5-year balloon.
Correct.
Which he then got refinanced over 20, and now that debt service went from 800,000 down to about, what, 250, 275,000?
Correct.
Something like that, so now instead of having that $800,000 for 5 years, we now got 275 for 20.
Now, and Star, the 8 million, was that done over 20 or 30 years for the CIP projects?
Those varied. They went from, some of them are 20 and some of them are 30.
Okay.
They were specific to whatever the project was.
Got it.
So some of the infrastructure projects are 30 years as opposed to the others being 20.
Okay,
And that's baked into these numbers?
They're in the 2017 CO numbers, but yes, they're included in the budget.
The payments?
Yes, sir.
that's on page 57?
Yes, that's the amortization schedule for that last bond issuance.
Okay. So at this point, do we have any debt that is, shorter, 5, 10 year, or the most of 20 and 30 year now?
No, some of them are close to being paid off, like the 2006, I think it is, bonds.
Page 46.
We'll start paying off.
The 2006, I believe, is the Cedar
No, that's not
Breaks.
the one. There's one of them, 2008 or 9, that we'll actually pay off last year, that we're going to make payments on that one.
2009.
That's the one. Looks like we owe about 10 years on the 2008 at this point, maybe 8-ish on the 2006.
I guess maybe the real point I was getting at is their original amortization was over a longer period of time, so you're not seeing super large annual payments due to them because they were on shorter amortization. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, and plus anything that we had historically had already been refied to the point of stretching it out longer.
Okay.
We've refied everything we could possibly refi when the timing would come up so that we could stretch it out.
Right.
So now we're in that pattern where there's nothing left that we can refi for a year or two without penalty.
Right.
It'll cost us more to refi it than it would actually help us. So,
And it seemed like the last time we did that, Tom's main goal was trying to even out the payments over the 20-year period.
correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Any more questions about the debt services or debt levels?
I understand it.
Well, I do one question. I know it sounds like you're going to check into kind of where we are relative to others. I know I asked Tom to produce that. He did it one point. He gave it to Star and I, and if I can dig it up, I'll send it to you. But it showed, I don't know, 10 or 11 municipalities in our area and our debt service compared to theirs. And we weren't, like Lakeways was twice per capita as what ours was, for example. So I realize $35 million sounds like an awful lot, and we don't have a very broad tax base with a lot of sales tax and so forth to pay for it, but per capita basis, we didn't seem like we were outrageously high, I guess I would say.
I don't disagree. That's why I say that we go back to that policy decision by council, what we can handle. One of the things I think it does impact us, though, is if we keep a higher threshold, it may limit our ability for the economic development projects moving forward from some of our previous discussions. Yeah. I just want to make sure that we hit that, as Councilor Smith says, that happy medium for allowing us to do these other things, so that if we do need to reach out, we can dig down and still do things within our fund balance reserves that do not impact that bonding ability. That's just that challenge. I think we're going to see a lot newer challenges, this council will, and the council's moving forward with opportunities right now with the development that we're going to have to be cognizant of, just like our last presentation of a project that is completely new, that half of us go, that's the craziest thing ever. But some of those we're going to have to consider on the economic development side. I just want to make sure we present it. And then once you say this is our line, and after we get the information back from Tom and John, we'll work from there.
What page was the short-term debt on?
The short-term debt is on page, someone gets there before me, just go ahead and tell me. It is on page 15. Top of that page, short-term debt, it shows the number at $795,146. And then it breaks down in the middle of that page where you see numbers. It breaks down the general fund and joint utility fund and the number of loans within each fund and the dollar amount appropriated to those. So page 15, first page 15.
And how much of that can we pay off?
We can pay as
Without
much as you
putting
want to
up-
pay.
What's our reserve, 3 million?
On the general fund side,
Does it make a difference?
it does. We would only pay general fund debt with general fund dollars. Joint utility fund, we'd pay with joint utility. So if you just go back to that 10-year financial, just FYI on page 22, and you look at the fund balance reserves, mind you, these numbers with the current year are going to be increased at the end of this year, but that would show you that general fund balance is 3.3 million, and then the joint utility fund balance is 887,000. We're projecting a minimum of $500,000 over revenues over expenditures for both funds this year, and I say minimum loosely. So in theory, if we wanted to pay those items down and zero out that, we could do that off the revenues generated over expenditures for both funds in the existing FY18.
Just a question, why is the general fund balance greater than the joint utility by so much? It looks to me like they would be more balanced. Is that because we took more from water and gave it to somebody else?
No, sir. So again, the revenues that come in from general fund are based on the services and the ad valorem tax. The revenues for a joint utility are based on those revenues generated by the charge for services. Larger projects, larger payments, the transfers based on the utility rate study definitely show that we transfer $1 million, 1.25, and then $1.5 from the joint utility over to the general fund to help pay the debt service payments each year. So that's a great point, Councilor Smith. One of our goals is to be able to create a healthier joint utility fund balance so that we have dollars accessible if we need to. Let's hypothetically say that that a water plant has pumps fail. We have cash on hand to do it instead of having to go borrow money with our great bond rating if we have a healthier fund balance. And that's our proposed request to council, is if we can get that fund balance healthier, that's what we would like to see. I put in the message a 50% fund balance appropriation. So if the joint utility fund is a $7 million operation annually, we would like to see 3.5 million. I talked to Councilor Sullivan and I said, I'd like to see 100% fund balance reserve joint utility, which would be 7 million. That hits the catastrophic
Right.
of we have no water. The straw is dry. We bring in water. The sewer treatment plant fails. We truck out waste. That's the number there. So one of our challenges is to make sure we build that number up. The FY18 budget year will go a long way in building that number back up for joint utility, and it'll also go a long way in adding to the general fund reserve.
And where does the money come from for that fund? The reason why I'm asking is if you're running a 20 cent, well, I guess 20 cent is the O&M side of the house. It doesn't look like there's enough money to build it up with.
On joint utility or on general fund?
Joint utility.
Joint utility is all done, it's all based on
The water bill?
charge for services. Yes, sir.
Josh, I did find that email. I sent it to you.
Great.
It's got that spreadsheet with the comparison.
Thank you, sir. And so that goes back to that point about the utility rates in the study. We have proposed trying to get back on track with the proposed utility rate increases. That's our proposal because the city paid for a utility rate study in 15, updated in 16. Last year, you did an increase to the base rates and not to the, basically the per unit cost or the per gallon cost. This year, we're proposing an increase for the water and wastewater rates based on that rate study to get us back in line with where we should be.
But we're a year behind.
We are, yes, sir. But last year, what we would have done last year is a per unit increase and not a base rate increase. So by council last year doing a base rate increase, you did half of it. So we're actually only half a year behind. With the proposal in there now, we would be caught up with the plan, but then we would need a new plan. The new plan, however, Council Sullivan brought this to the attention, the new plan may actually say that we're above where we need to be. But we haven't done that rate study yet. What I would like to do is over the course of this next couple months, we continue to look at the monthly consolidated statement, the revenues and expenditures, and you look at those numbers, and then council's able to look at your decision-making for rates.
I think I've mentioned this to you before. Outside of golf and eminent domain now and a couple of things, the thing I hear about most is water rates, and people are just furious about water rates. And so, if there's anything we can do by analyzing the growth that we've had and realize maybe we don't have to institute the increases that we were projected earlier, I'd like to see that happen because people are not happy.
Right.
And I understand because I think our rates are high relative to other municipalities in the area.
Well, I'm not pointing out that other utilities in the area are bigger than us and they have more to spread the cost out over.
I totally get it, but I'm hearing the pain. And if there's something we can do to alleviate that because of the growth that we've experienced, I'd like to see us do it.
Then do we have a model, a computer model or a spreadsheet or something that
I think that's
says?
what he's proposing. He's asking for us to direct him to do a rate study. That's what I heard.
Yeah, existing, we do not have the model from the previous 16 study. We just have the basic spreadsheets presented back to us. However, we do have the ability on our side to look at some of those numbers and adjust it. But
Even if you're looking at gross numbers, not looking at details, it looks to me like they'll be able to get close.
what we want to do, the thing with a rate study is we want to actually do a full utility cost of service study and not just a rate study. What the rate study does is it looks about surrounding areas and says, what can our people handle?
That's how we got into trouble.
Exactly. The utility study shows us what the cost of service delivery is and then what our rates have to be to provide for long-term growth. And it only projects out 10 years. So where you're talking about 30 years down the road, we got to do the right study. And that's what staff's saying in the year. With our team in place, we want to do the cost of service delivery. And as Councilor Sullivan says, if we even pull out the increase this year, but we start this at the beginning of the year, that allows us to see what that debt service looks like based on our CIP, based on our plan moving forward, so that we get the rate where it needs to be. And it factors in all the factors you mentioned earlier. But that's the difference. I think a lot of us in local government look at the rate study and we think that's the end all, when we have to look at what that cost of service delivery is. It's a little more intricate and it's a little more complicated.
It is.
But we can do it. There's smart enough people to help us to get to that point, and then we get you the actual number so that maybe our rates are high. based on that. But then again, maybe they're low. The good thing is the wastewater treatment plant's in good condition. The water treatment plant number 3 is in really good condition. The challenge for us, as Councilor Smith points out to us, is the pipes in the ground. There's a ton of pipes that need to be upgraded, and that's where our costs are going to be, and that's where we've got to forecast that out for that rate.
And the citizens won't see that because it's underground.
It's not sexy at all. It's horrible.
But we have a pretty good understanding from the work that Dave Stewart's done on what's left to be reworked, as I
Yes, ma'am.
understand it, and a good cost analysis of what it costs us to do per linear foot.
We can estimate everything based on our dollars right now and our cost of installation. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I mean, I think to Councilman Sullivan's point, I think we do need to do that because if it comes back, yes, citizens are not happy with the water rates, right? I think we all know that. But if we do the due diligence that Josh was describing, then we can point to that more in-depth study and say, well, this is
the
why.
reason why.
This is
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Here's the detail. You know, and I'd rather have that as a justification if we do need to do another increase.
And there's a couple things we'd like to do in that is what'll happen is on the cost of service delivery, we'll actually review, the impact fees, which is a really important thing. That impact fund is going to have $2 million at the end of the year. That's a big deal. We could use that for new service lines to reach these new populations, and we have it set aside. That's what we want. We want the impact fee to be big enough so that when we have to expand water treatment or wastewater treatment facilities, we have the money. We don't go hit the debt, but we're still building it.
We wouldn't use those fees for rejuvenation of older areas?
Impact fees can't go into
Okay.
servicing the old areas. They have to be all developed on new stuff. So, but that's what the cost of service will get to us. It'll review everything, which is so much more beautiful in the picture when we present that back to our citizens so they understand. It could also be a reduction of the fees for impact fees, and potentially, if we have that much growth and development. But what it'll do is it'll forecast development too and show an impact.
And when we have to add 2 million gallons a day capacity at water treatment plant 3, which is basically we got a 2 million gallon capability today at treatment plant 3. When we have to double it to go to 4, that's where the impact fees will come in because that's new. That's not existing.
I'm changing my shirt too.
But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
I know you were.
Well, the question I asked, is this a working document or is this, is this going to change? I've heard a lot of questions and not being through this process until this first time. Like if you find that the M&O is too low, are you going to change it in the document or if we're going to pay off the short-term debt, are you going to show the impact that gives to us so that by September, we're looking at the complete document like it should be,
That's exactly it. And with this, with our council and with our staff, I want us to have that working document. As it goes, at any point throughout the year, obviously council can make changes to the budget that you want to, which is beautiful. So what we're doing is, we just want to present the information as we predict. And then when we make these decisions, we will do a net impact, make those changes, and then change the numbers for you. So hypothetically, you say, let's not change the utility rates next year. We take that out of the dollars, present it back to you and say, this is where we're at.
So
Yes, sir.
each council meeting moving forward,
Yes,
we're
sir.
going to be making those changes.
We will make changes.
So by the time we get to end of September and we vote for it, you'll see the final version.
All right. That's what I'm.
Maybe just kind of a fundamental concept back up around this growth issue. What's the only way for us to lower rates?
Adding
Rooftops, adding houses. Well,
users.
We've been adding them like crazy. And so the fundamental question comes, we've been adding out all these houses, but not only are we not lowering rates, we're raising them. And so I think somehow we need that story. We need to have it very crisp to tell the constituents and the citizens why that is happening. And it may turn out that we do the study and we figure out, maybe we can't lower it, but we don't have to raise it again. And I think that would at least make them somewhat happy. But God, if we're not crisp, we will be roasted.
And back to Councilor Williams' question, it piggybacks on Councilor Sullivan. The challenge for staff is when you pay taxpayer dollars for for a study and you set out rate schedules, for staff, we need to show that we're asking you to implement that. Because if not, it's a wasted document. You've wasted $40,000, $80,000. So we're proposing catching back up because we also need to make sure that that joint utility fund balance is where it needs to be. We're getting closer. As we watch the July financial, the August, September, you may look at it and finally say, well, that's not half bad. And it may give you the confidence to say, we don't need to increase that rate next year, or we need to lessen the impact of it. We're completely on board with that. And that's why the working document matters so much.
Right.
We're in the last quarter, which gives us a little bit of time, but it allows us to at least look at one more month, to look at the July financial before you start having to really drill down to the projections for next year.
Okay.
We'll update the fund balance numbers so you can see what that impact is. So I agree. If anything we can give back to the citizens, I believe our staff is all for giving back what we can give back. We just need to make sure that we have healthy fund balances for long term.
Yeah, we're achieving our strategic goals.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely agree, but I will say that one goal, that strategic goal that I have is that, I do feel our debt levels are too high, but I want Tom's advice, right? Because it's 3x our annual budget. That's uncomfortable for me. I would never put myself in that debt scenario. So I want to be cognizant of that. And then as we do have increasing revenues, to your point, and I think that, to the M&O point, doesn't mean we need to necessarily increase our spending just because we have increased revenues. I'd much rather put ourselves in a very secure financial situation. That's my 2 cents.
And Mayor Pro Tem, that's what you'll see in this document.
Yeah.
Although we've added action items, we've not really increased those services at this point. We've done some things to make sure that we're on point with operating in the same level. But by FY20, there will be some service delivery items. If development continues to happen, there will be more staff. There'll be, you can name every department, and I could say yes. And so that growth will happen. We need to be ready for that. But as I've said over and over again, I just don't want to jump the gun and add the things too early. I think everything happens at a time, and so it's exactly what you're saying.
Where are we at, Josh?
Well,
we're all over the place.
Page 16, Mayor.
What town is this?
Round Rock.
Page 16.
Page 16, on the first section, would have hit those utility rates.
Right.
We've talked about that. The documents that we gave you are basically back to the rate studies. It shows you what the changes are projected to be in our budget and what that impact would be to the overall FY19 budget if we did those rate increases for FY19. Again, all I ask is that we watch the monthly financial statements over the next 2 months to see what we feel confident in predicting for next year. One challenge we have is even though we feel it now, we may not have the confidence to project a trend line change or to say that trend's going to stay. Right now, we feel pretty good. We've seen 2 years of significant growth. We need a little more. And so in my first budget with you guys and first budget for a few counselors, we still need a little bit of confidence to create a budget moving forward. So a lot of these numbers are going to be conservative. Hopefully at the end of the year, we're going to be happy. We're going to say, hey, we've got to a good place for the long-term plan. If we go the opposite direction and we forecast too high, end of the year, we're sitting here grotesquely disappointed and frustrated that we predicted the numbers up too high. So the utility rates, I think we've covered. Any other questions on that one? Just when you get to page 18, this is also an important page for you as of right now. It also goes to that 10-year financial, but what it's showing you is the fund balances in each of those 8 funds that we said we have. So we have 8 total funds. They're all listed there on your left. That's the fund balance as of those end dates. The one on the right shows fund balance as of 9/30/18, and that's showing actuals. So those are the dollars that we have sitting in the bank for those from last year to this year.
So the 9/30/18 are those projected numbers though, right?
Well, yes. So projected with our numbers the way we projected it in the budget, not based on the actuals, based on a conservative projection for the end of the year.
Okay.
Based on a conservative revenue and a very liberal expenditure side, says that in the course of a year, the total fund balances would be about the same. If you look at the June financial report, it's going to show you that number probably is going to be significantly higher as of the actual 9/30/18, because those numbers are so much higher. We're seeing that now. The revenues are so much higher over the expenditures the way we're going. And that goes to conservative expenditures through each department, and it goes to very good revenue growths.
Now, the only one of those that goes down is the construction. I'm assuming those are bond dollars that are on account and are used as we complete
Yes, sir.
projects?
That's basically all bond dollars, construction, as that last $7.5 million bond, plus or minus, is spent, those dollars go out of there.
Okay.
Every time we clean out a bond, that should get down to zero.
So that's a,
But that's, so what I guess my main point is, that's not upsetting that that number's gone down. We're just using funds as we would plan to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the proposal is, however, moving forward, we'd like to start putting money from each fund back into capital project fund so that we have some dollars set aside for capital projects. One example would be we have this water plant number 2 property, and all of a sudden we decide to turn that into a passive or an active park. If we have capital dollars set aside, we don't have to go jump into joint utility or in general fund dollars. We can go into the capital fund project and put up a $40,000 play structure, a pavilion for $25,000. We'd have those dollars set aside. So what we'd like to do moving forward is to be able to establish transfers into these funds for particular uses. If you look at the park fund, you see $22,000. It's not going to get you a whole lot in the park world. 20 trees right there. Not good trees either, like crappy trees. But if we start appropriating dollars into there, then we know how to do matches for these grants. And that goes back to what Mayor Pro Tem's talking about with our park project moving forward. With that next grant proposal from Texas Parks and Wildlife, when we do that proposal, we'll need an allocation from the council to say, if we get it, we need to do matching dollars. We'd have that money earmarked right there. At this time, if we ask that of council, we'll have to earmark it from the general fund reserve, which we're great with that. But if we move dollars into that fund, then they're earmarked. They can't be moved again. And that's a great thing. So that's how we want to start moving dollars into particular areas.
Gotcha.
Page 18 just gives you that. Right now, how much money do you have? And if someone says that, goes onto Facebook and says the city just went broke, if $12.2 million is broke for a city with 7,000 people, we're broke. They're not lying. But if 12.2 seems to be okay for you, we're doing all right. I mean, we don't have enough cash on hand to pay off the debt service. And anyone that's extremely wealthy would tell you it'd be nice to have more cash on hand than you got debt. Doesn't happen that way in government. We're doing this much better than our federal government. So it's not half bad. Page 19, if you're good to just flip to there, that talks about the pay plan proposal. One of the things that this city's been active over the last 5 years is trying to make sure that we move our pay plan for the employees. You've had to go through a couple of times where you've done larger increases after looking at a pay plan update. That's fantastic. It's definitely appreciated by employees. Look between page 19 and page 20. Page 20 will tell you that in 2015, you did market rate increases based on a pay plan. In 2016, you did market rate increases. That was just a commitment by the council to say, we're going to hit this for 3 years. 2017, you did the same thing. So over the course of those 3 years, you basically contributed $700,000 into getting the pay rates up to where they needed to be based on that study. In 2018, there was a 3% COLA across the board, so 3% cost of living across the board. And then in 2019, what we've proposed is a COLA increase based on the CPI, which would be 2.6%. That's at the very bottom of page 19. And then an up to 1% merit increase. What a merit does is it says you look at your annual evaluation. If you score good, you get a 0.5% increase. If you score excellent, you get a 1% increase.
1% increase.
And I've talked to a couple of counselors about this. This would be a new system. I look at it as a merit-based system building program. Part of the comments have been, well, if you really want to have merit-based, you need to have a number up there that makes people want to work. I I agree. But to get into the system, personally, professionally, I feel we have to build the system in year one, and then in year two, we're able to potentially raise the performance standard.
That was going to be my question around that. I'm much more comfortable for a pay-for-performance type environment, mostly because that's how I'm paid and have been my whole life. But what you're proposing is that the following budget year, instead of putting 5% into COLA and 1 into merit, you would flip that or
Yes, ma'am.
something along those lines.
So what the COLA needs to do, the cost of living every year based on the CIP moves the whole pay plan. So it shifts it. If you miss a year, it's like Counselor Smith said with utility rates, when you miss a year, you're already behind an 8 ball, if an 8 ball is a bad thing to you. So the COLA shifts the pay plan and keeps you where it needs to be. And then the merit gives you based on performance. So let's say next year the CPI says it's 2.1 and council decides we want to go 3% for merit. That's exactly it. We can raise it, but if we don't train our people on that system, I personally don't think it's fair in the first year. I think it puts more challenge on the supervisors, to be honest, and then potentially they would be punished through the system. But that's the way I look at it.
Just asking your advice as a manager here, if for the past 4 years we've done 3%, could we not, if we decided that we were going to still use 6%, could we not just do 3-year on the COLA again and 3-year in merit? Because they're already trained at a 3%, if you will.
You can do it.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want, as you know.
I'm asking advice.
The thing with the COLA is if we base it on the market, which is what we should be doing, then we base it off the CPI. That's just a great standard of practice. If you pick a number that says you want potential for 5%, that's great. Whatever the CPI is, then we take the other and put it on merit. So if the CPI is 2.6,
gotcha.
The merit would be 2.4. We'd say that excellent evaluations would get 2.4, good evaluations would get 1.2. So good employees would end up getting a net of 3.8. Excellent employees would get 5%. I still want to use the COLA based on the CPI so that we have a standard by which we don't just pick it every year. It works out easier that way. And then if we have that total number, as you're saying.
And are those numbers run separately than the consumer market and the business market? I've only ever looked at them from a macro market environment. I don't know, do they run them separately for the public market?
No, actually, you just use a different indicator off of that consumer price index.
Okay.
So it's a different line item. We define the line item based on the urban wage line, and that's what we would use based off of May of the year.
Okay.
So we would have the same standard every year, so no one could come back and say, well, why didn't you give me this number? This is what it is. We'd use the same line based on the consumer price index. The merit's totally up to you. Councilor Smith and I talked about where you'd really put a number to get people to perform higher. I just don't like to give that out there without
You got
being
to
able
train
to.
them first.
I think so.
You know,
It's
this
just a
is very
process.
similar to Coke system, except the only thing that we used to do at Coke was we made the department have a objective as a team. So it wasn't, you had the individual working on something, but then you had the developmental services as a group working on something. I don't know if we have enough people in each department to do it that way, but.
So alternatively too, because we do something similar for our larger organizations,
Yeah.
but then our executives have individual development plans. So at
Right.
the beginning of the year, it would be work for the HR department, but each individual would set out their objectives for the year with you and HR, and you would measure them against those particular goals.
Those particular goals, yeah. But if you don't have the system set up yet, then it's better to keep it low and work them into it.
And so on that page 20, if in your head you're thinking, hey, I'd like to say that there's a 2% merit for the year, page 20 gives you what that budget impact number is on the bottom. So page 20 shows you general fund, golf course fund, utility fund, and total, and it'll show you what a 0.5% increase equates in each of those funds in total. If you were looking at 2%, we would say that 2% increase for the general fund would be $52.3 thousand. Golf course would be 8.1, and utility fund would be 26.5 thousand. The total impact to the budget, including the benefits, would be $87,000. So If Mayor Pro Tem said, let's kick that up instead of 1% up to 3% for the merit, we would add an additional $87,000 to the overall three funds, and that's how that number would play out. And that's why we gave you those numbers, so that when you make that, you don't have to look at our number and say, oh, that's what we're going to take. You come back and tell us, we'll implement it, make it work the way that council says.
How about the retirement and all the medical costs are, I mean, I've been in places where you got a pay increase, but that didn't cover your payroll cost, which is where they take out the insurance and that kind of stuff. I mean, you say it includes that in the numbers, but are our insurance numbers and all the cost to support an employer, are they going up greater than or equal to 5%?
As of right now, the insurance aren't going up next year. So, and one thing we're also doing is shopping that around. So if there's a better plan, not necessarily just a better rate, but a better plan, we're shopping that now so that if there's something else we can propose to council, we'd love to. Personally, I think that our insurance is not the best insurance plan for our employees. I think that the amount that employees pay monthly based on the deductibles and the service that's provided are ridiculous. We have conversations internally that there's no way that the new employee coming in that's a single person, they have a kid, and the whole world blows up with what the costs are. But a new person, 24 years old, there's no way they can have insurance based on our plan. The challenges are there. So as of right now, current plan, no increases provided. So yes, this would cover that.
And is TMI engaged to help you guys find another?
They are, actually.
Good, excellent.
And that's the beauty of having HR. She's working on it every day. So we're shopping with anybody and everybody. State Farm's decided they can do some things. We're asking them, what can you do for us?
And then I didn't talk to you about this previously, but last year I brought it up to Kenneth that, you know, should we consider coming off of Social Security and let people do their own thing? I don't know if y'all discussed that this year or not. Kenneth wasn't crazy about the idea. I guess because he grew up in the old world system, but right now that, you know, they might want to be in the markets instead of Social Security.
Yeah, I'm happy to continue to pay your Social Security. It won't be there when I'm there.
I'm not taking Social Security though.
Oh, you're not?
No, I can't take it until I'm 66.
Oh.
Because I'm in that group that's moving out now.
Was that,
74.
how many years ago was that?
What's that?
The 66?
That's all for the baby boomers. All the baby boomers moved out to 66.
Originally, and Kenneth did talk to me about this, but even without a choice, the chief has put a gun up and said, hey, we're going to talk about this. One of the challenges you see in police departments, because police departments have been making this change nationwide, where they shift from paying Social Security so their people can have more dollars. So then the competitive balance is out there because you have, again, let's go back to that 25-year-old officer who could be making $44,000 over here, but without having to pay into Social Security, could making $50,000 over here. And so that's a challenge for Chief. We've talked to this internally. I think we should continue having this discussion. I go on the other side because being as old school too, I think that the system has some benefits, but there's also the downside. So it's definitely one of those things we're considering. You don't see any of that changed here, but what happens is it has to be a citywide thing. We can't just let the police department in our city and our structure do it by themselves or just the development services. It's all or nothing. And so there's challenges.
So then you're going to have some people that are senior that want to stay put, and you're going to have junior people that may want to come off because they don't want to pay into a system that's losing.
We'll have to make a decision like we do everything else and move forward. What happens is what you have in is what it's based off of. So if I stopped.
I am going to stop. I'm sorry. I think it's a valuable conversation, and I think that we probably want to continue to have it, but I'm not sure it fits under the agenda of the budget meeting.
Oh, I thought it was.
Whether or not we remain on Social Security.
Well, that's a way to self-fund it.
It is.
That's right. We will follow up with you.
Okay.
We have discussions going on now, and between department heads, finance, HR, this will be another point we bring back to you. And I'll give you the hard numbers on that too when we get there. We've already addressed page 21 and 22, which is that 10-year financial analysis. I just ask you again that you have this electronically, you have it paper copy. Use this document when we're looking at it, because this is really our opportunity to look at trend lines. It's the top far column shows us the property evaluation. That shows us the growth in our community better than anything else. You don't have anything that hasn't been audited yet. So you're not going to have FY18 to compare to, but you're going to see when we get FY18, there's another big jump. And then by the time we get 19, good Lord willing, there'll be another big jump and so on. So this will help you look at those trends, follow fund balances, follow revenue line items, and say, well, I feel pretty comfortable that joint utility revenue in 18 should be right around 7.4 million. That's a easy way to look at the trend lines and project that out. So this is a document I'll reference often. Lots of times we want to look at the consolidated statement, and that just shows us now our operations and our fund balance. This just takes us back to everything on one page so you can see it. If we flip over to 23, that's that community support line item that we already talked about. Those are similar to what Councilor Williams said earlier. There may be other items that the council wants to consider in community support. There may have been organizations that have talked to you personally and said, hey, we'd like to have an additional $5,000, $10,000 this year. KLVB, when they gave their report to us, I believe they requested $8,000. This year we gave them $5,000. Council wants to make that decision? Great, we'll make the change. Current budget shows $3,000. If you say we're going to give them $5,000 more, we'll change it, put it in the budget, and you'll have it there. So this just shows you the numbers that we have in the budget as proposed to you.
The AM radio at 15.6, can we find out how much people are actually listening to that or using that? Because that seems rather high for a 20-minute loop that's out there every week. I can only listen to it for about 20 minutes and then it cycles on me. So I guess I know that Mayor Mitchell wanted that a couple of years ago as another means of communication. I just don't know how many people are actually going to that and using it. And is there any way to find out?
Yes, sir. What we actually are going to have to do, listenership is hard on an AM or an FM. So what we actually are going to do is survey, whether it's mailed out, emailed out, or social media, whatever we're going to do. Put the survey out there, and then also look at the operations for the radio station. I think we can actually get a little more use out and a little more expansion. I really like the idea of having it. I agree with Councilor Smith for what we're getting now. Maybe 15.6 might be a little heavy, but if I can get a microphone and talk every day for a couple hours about whatever I want to, then maybe 15.6 is low, because the people definitely want to hear what I'm saying. So Councilor Weatherly may not agree, but I want us to get more use, and I want us to be able to maximize it. I hate to just jump away from an outreach opportunity, but if we can maximize, that might be a good idea. And if not, we change those dollars over.
Well, if the loop is an issue, we have content, we have council meetings that we could loop.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't put music on there because you got to pay royalties, so.
No, you can listen online as well, and that might be a good initial proxy
Right.
for just how much
For clicks.
listenership we have.
And then we can measure that. That's something that we can Google Analytics to show you what you put it online. But we do have the ability to, based on FCC regulations, we can play certain kinds of music. We talked about this already, but there's an allowance that we can expand what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And that's a great thing. So if we can go out there and put all 70s rock, that's great. The whole world's happier. And that's something that we're talking about now. That's right. It'd be phenomenal.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor it. It just doesn't look like it's effective.
And proportionally, it is higher than some of the other areas. So there's a challenge there.
Where does the money come from for that, by the way?
The radio station?
Uh-huh.
I thought that it came out of general fund, and I don't know if anything comes from the hotel tax or not. So
That was my question.
since we're not marketing on the hotel tax, it wouldn't come there. Whereas chamber dollars, some of that comes from the hotel tax.
Right.
What are the other funding sources for the chamber outside of the city funding?
So membership fees.
Okay.
City of Jonestown does pay them also
Do we know
from
what
their
they
hotel
contribute?
tax. I think it's $18,000 a year, I believe, from their hotel tax. Point Venture doesn't pay anything.
Yeah, we used to get reports from the chamber on membership
Yeah.
and tourism. but I haven't seen those in quite a
Well,
while.
they're supposed to be expanding their services to include Point Venture and Valente. They're talking about changing from Lago Vista Chamber to Lago Vista Jonestown to North Shore
Chamber of Commerce.
to get more funding and to.
If we can get that information, then I think
We used to
it would
get,
be
we used to
helpful.
get quarterly reports.
Membership and what? What was the other part of that?
Tourism.
Tourism, okay.
You know, those were the two big components on that, because I was trying to figure out, you know, we forgive the chamber lots of money. I mean, $88,000, and what do we get for that? You know, well, I realize that part of it's membership, but part of that's coming out of our hot tax for, basically for overnights. Heads in beds, I think is what they call it.
And the benefit there is that marketing aspect. For the things they do put out, we do get, they're basically one of the leading marketers for our city off that hotel tax, trying to drive traffic in.
Yeah, and I get that. I just, if they're looking at expanding their coverage area, then I want to make sure that we continue to get, if we're paying for the majority of their funding, then I want to make sure that they continue to focus on us. And so I don't know if there's any kind of, if it's just a gentleman's agreement, or with that budget, we have any kind of contractual agreement from them on a share of time or a share of efforts.
One of the things we're actually working with the chamber as of Monday of this week is to develop an agreement.
Good.
We're working on gentleman's agreement, and for the chamber, that's not a good process because they don't know that there's going to be money year to year, so it's hard for them to do long-term. So we requested that the chamber develop an agreement, a 3 to 5 year agreement that we could present to council, and it would have just that. What are we getting out of our dollars? It'd be great if we had that with everyone, but chamber asked. I thought it's an excellent idea. Now Mayor Pro Tem supported it, so it must be genius. So we'll, that's something that'll be come back to council quickly, because I know that Elaine, the current director, would like to have some kind of confidence moving forward.
Does the Lago Fest money come from the hot tax as well?
Some of the Lago Fest money comes from hot tax. Some comes from, the majority of that, so there's hot tax, and then we don't really appropriate anything. That's from the sponsorships.
Well, and that was the second question I was asked. It shows 40,000 goes to it, but I thought our net position with Lago Fest was much better than that.
These are expenditures.
Sure.
So that's only what was going to be expended for the year. But the revenue's coming in as of this past year. If the gentleman sitting on the end raised more money, then we actually theoretically could make more from Lago Fest.
Say that again?
If you could raise more money. So you're right. We actually, once we get that final report, which they're waiting on a couple sponsorships now, you'll receive that final report. You could see that it's break even, or there could be a savings for next year.
I'd like to go ahead and request that we get KLVB a little bit more funding, since it does affect the entire population. If we're going to fund some of the specialty organizations at a higher level, that leaves me with concern, because they're working on the entire environment.
Meaning
Meaning the Hill Country Singers, the Lago Vista Players, the musical theater. Those are special interest groups, and I'd prefer that we fund this city beautification at least at the same level.
Oh, I see.
Well, based on their plan that they gave us, proposal, they want to provide more art structures. And so if we're going to have a program, the one thing they've not looked into is grant sponsorship. And through Texas Arts, they can have some dollars. So what we've encouraged them to do is to leverage our dollars to double the dollars that they can do. And that's something that we're trying to push. But they are a volunteer organization. So we've said we'll partner with them. And but we can gladly put that at 5, 6.
I'd be happy with 5. This is what we gave them last year.
KLVB.
If the rest of council could support that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't want to decrease on them year over year.
but you threw out a number, giving them 5,000 additional to make it a total of 8. Was that because they had requested that amount, or you just were bandying that number about?
Effectively, they requested it after being asked to develop the long-range plan. So I asked them to give us a plan so we knew what they were trying to do. Instead of 1 year, they would give us a 3 to 5 year plan,
Right.
and asked them to then give us a budget number that would better suit that plan. Then they came out and said, this year was 5,000, so they kicked it up to the 8,000. So an additional 5.
In what you saw in the long-range plan, did you feel like the 8,000 was warranted?
I actually think that the 5 is a really good number for the year,
I
because
like
I still
5.
want to encourage them to leverage it with the Texas.
Okay,
My
Arts.
recommendation would be 5.
okay,
Yeah.
got it.
And I can put that number in, and then as we get through the process, if we want to change it, we can put it there.
I would appreciate it. We can always go back from there if we need to, but
Well, the only thing I worry about walking them up too high is that we rely heavily on volunteerism to take care of that. And as they start to age, and they may or may not be able to do that, then that's gonna swing over to general fund probably to continue whatever they've done in the future if we can't find new volunteers. Volunteerism beyond the folks we have today is drying up. I mean, you see it at the library right now, but, I mean, we used to get, 2.5 heads volunteered, now we're down, 2 or 1.9 full-time equivalents. So I'm just saying the volunteerism in the next generation is not what it is with the current generation.
Yeah, I've been looking at the Lago Vista at their current budget systems too. They're starting to see increases in some of their general maintenance costs as well. Things like even their trash bags went up 25% over the last order. So I just want to make sure that we're at least providing some of the very basics that they need. They're not spending that much money on plants and things. I just don't want to come down from where we were this year.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor, this is, that section there goes, the written words have now disappeared. The next sections it starts with the consolidated statement and then the individual budgets. We've already hit on the debt service, which is good. That's towards the back end. We've talked about the CIP, which I said that'll be a section in its own, so we can only focus on CIP. We are doing good on time. We have at least 30 minutes here for the questions that we would have from council. Just want to flip you over to the second, number 1. So that would be at the page 1 of the consolidated statement. Those line items, this is a document that you see monthly. This shows you updated information. It, as we talked before, shows us the 2016 audited end of year, the 2017 audited end of the year. It shows you the budget for 18 and the year-end estimate for 18. I've already alluded to the fact that the estimates for the year end are extremely conservative. As we see month-to-month statements, we do see that there's an impact of revenues over expenditures that we're seeing now every single month. It's a great thing for us to see. It's not going the opposite direction where we're losing money. We actually see good positive growth throughout these budgets. You'll see the revenue number, and then you'll see each department. When you get into the right-hand columns, the base budget is the number that we took out and said this is the general operations from the current fiscal year carried over for 19. And then you've got additional requests, which we've put into the budget. And then you'll have the total budget request 2018 to 2019. That's the number we're proposing for each individual department for 19. And then we have the preliminary budget for 1920 so that you can see that moving forward. After that consolidated statement, just so before we get to the questions, each individual department broken down into the categories of personnel, operations, supplies, services, and fixed assets that you can compare individually. So we're at a place now for all questions. We can field those questions.
Yeah, I had a question first on aquatics. Looking back last year, I believe during the budget cycle last year, they just wanted us to be aware that we may need to resurface the pool. Are we anticipating that that's going to need to happen again this year, or do we think it can wait another?
We did that this year.
Oh, we did?
This year.
Never mind. Okay.
Currently, before we opened up, James's crew, mostly James, got in there and resurfaced the pool. Actually did a complete, I would say a complete facelift, but it was a remodel in a lot of areas. And if you haven't been down there, you didn't see it before, at least see it now because it's phenomenal.
Hence the decrease in the budget year over year.
It is.
Okay.
And one thing is, there's still some issues when you drain that pool for maintenance, then you have increased water because we do charge ourselves utilities. One of the questions Councilor Smith said earlier is, well, one fund balance is higher than the other. Well, we could not charge ourselves, but that would not go back to how an enterprise fund works. So if we drain the pool and fill it back up, we charge ourselves for the water that's going into the sewer system and we're filling it back up. That's a large item. So when we go back and do the repair, you may think it only cost $5,000 to repair that surface or fix something, but it could cost $20,000 in water and wastewater to drain and fill the pool. And that's something you've got to remember whenever we do those. So it is best that we're not just losing that water because we do treat that water throughout the year.
And then building maintenance, I know we talked about some projects, particularly because your staff is very, very tightly fit in. Would that fall under that line item? you're kind of like sardines in here. Just saying.
We all use good deodorant, and one of the proposals that you've not seen yet, that you've been waiting on, is a building proposal and some changes. There's nothing for that in the next year budget. You'll see that separately as soon as we have that proposal for you. There are no changes made to the infrastructure of this City Hall facility in your proposal for next year. There are only building improvements of minor shape, form, or fashion.
So when that proposal becomes available, would that come under building maintenance or would it go into a CIP type project?
Personally, I'd like to put into a capital improvement project.
Okay.
And then we would have it separate to the side.
Josh, up here at the top under revenues, you have a decrease in the revenues from the 18-19 budget to the 19-20 budget. Are we anticipating there'll be less revenues with the building that we have and the new customers? You got it going from 5.9 million to 5.8 million.
There's a couple things that we've seen just in terms of payments, but no. Once we get to the end of here, when we're getting to that 2020 budget, we'll actually be changing that number significantly based on new properties, new
Okay, but there's not something coming up that
No,
you're
sir.
anticipating there's a decrease in our
We
revenues?
are not anticipating those actually going down. We anticipate those going up. What it does is it looks at we're looking at a baseline to balance that budget so that we minimize that impact.
Okay.
As we get closer to the end of this year, we'll be able to put a better number for FY20 out there so people can start looking at 20.
All right.
When council approves the FY19, we will update the FY20 so that it's a better, more effective and efficient projection for FY20. Yes, sir.
Josh, when I came and chatted with you, we talked a little bit about that new transportation study, an update from the one we had 10 years ago. Is that something you were able to find a place in the budget, or are we still trying to figure out if we're going to be able to do that for?
We definitely can. It's not in the budget here. When you talked to me, I said, you know what, totally forgot that. And I wrote it down under Kevin Sullivan. That's complete omission, which goes back to what Councilor Williams is saying. That's omitted. If we want to put it in there, I think it's something that we should, as we look at that. We're estimating between $40,000 and $60,000. So we're going to get a hard number for you per your request. And so we're working on that now. Want to bring that back to council to determine if you want to fund that for this year or not.
Okay.
But that's definitely something I think we could consider. I did send an email today based on another omission, which was basically, we don't have a section for the council that's separate. We need to have that. I told you this in the retreat. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if it's council's budget for the year totals $1,000. We need to have a budget line item there. We need to have an area where travel and training is budgeted for council, not just coming out of an admin budget. We need our council to travel to train. You're not just traveling down the street to go look at things, but we need you to travel so you get updated on some of these things. Today would be a fine example. That would be a travel budget line item if we're traveling over to Round Rock to meet with other organizations. So that has been omitted, again, just out of pure ignorance on my part. I was probably told by someone to do it and I left it out. So I sent you a projection in that email. We'll provide that back to you with an updated version for next round as well.
Okay.
Another item we talked about was the economic development director. Now, is that something that's a similar situation that you guys will come up with an estimate of that and present it to council for us to consider?
One of the things that the Economic Development Commission is going to be doing is looking at a proposed budget for next year. One of the things they've asked now is, hey, what money do we have to create this document? And I said, well, I don't know what money you have. You don't really have any money. But if you want to put something together, put a request to council, we'll bring it back to council to see. We will present that number to get this Economic Development Commission, Commission, to get that number to you. There may be some differences in what staff recommends in the council and maybe differences in what you recommend. So,
okay, but I'm not talking about the Economic Development Committee. I'm talking about potentially adding staff directly.
Same thing. I'm saying the whole overall budget.
Okay.
Councilor Williams may say that we need to add that position.
Right.
Josh Ray may say that we don't need to add that position. We'll get you a number based on that discussion.
Okay.
You'll consider that together.
Okay. Yeah. Another thing we chatted about was the equipment for type 1 filtering at the water treatment plant. or wastewater treatment plant. Is that something that we're going to try to work on for this coming year, or it's going to be a little further out?
We're actually looking at the grants now, so it theoretically could come to you sooner before the year. If it doesn't come to you sooner, and we're going to try for some additional grant dollars for next year, we will include it into the budget document for next year. If it comes this current year, we'll bring it back as a proposal within the current year.
Okay.
That's something we feel is important for next year.
Yeah.
Is that the effluent water for the parks?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. for
Type
the
1
new-
effluent.
for the
Yeah.
new-
Okay.
for the new park.
And I mean, and once the filtering's there, you could use it for parks, the medians, whatever.
Expansion.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's gonna be type 1 to put it on the park
Right.
ground.
So,
Right. need
Josh,
that.
I know that we wanted to give everybody a break between council meetings. Do you think at this time it would be a good idea for us to try to discuss the next time we want to meet as next special meeting we want to hold?
Whatever time limit you think's great, Mayor Pro Tem, or good. It would be good. I do know that we have a difficult time coming up. So what we will do first, we'll make a few updates, and we're going to send a new document out to you just electronically so that you can swap those out and look at those. There should be room in your book to put a whole second document in there, and we'll give you a divider if you want to print them. But we'll send that out to you so you can look at it. I do know we have some traveling coming up. Mayor's leaving tonight, and Councilor Sutherland's leaving tomorrow, so
Monday.
everybody else may be leaving too. But, yes, that'd be good too.
I'm going to open my calendar. Is it okay if we take a few minutes to discuss when we can potentially meet again?
When do you think you'll
After
have
August 5th.
the updates
That
out?
week, the next week I'm out. Of course, you can have it without.
Monday.
Oh, okay.
What next week?
You're back on August 5th. I leave on August 6th.
Oh,
Um,
I'm going from the 23rd to the 28th of July.
Okay, so let's just look at, okay, so well, that's next week. They probably are not going to be ready. The following week is the 30th, and you're out that week. I'm out the 6th,
When do you get back, Suzanne?
the 12th.
Okay.
What about the week of the 13th, August 13th?
Do you want to do it
Why
again?
don't we just do it like we did this
This-
one at 4:30 before
Yes,
the
that's
council-
what I was
Does that
proposing.
give us-
council meeting
does
on
that
the
give us
16th?
Does that give us enough time?
That's two.
Josh said he's going to have
4 weeks.
updates out here in the next
4 weeks.
few days, by Monday. So plenty of time to review before.
It's 4 weeks.
We'll get the updates out, Mayor. We have no issue. You could take a 30-minute break and we could do updates. So Monday's not gonna, as long as STAR's working Monday, we'll be good. And then if we could have another couple-hour session, I feel pretty confident that we'll get to that point. And then we'll do the same thing, that on the back end of the meeting, we'll have some more time, that as long as you've got the ability to stay late, we can make it.
August 16th work for everybody at 4:30?
Sounds good.
Yep, yeah.
I keep August clear just for these reasons.
August 16th at 4:30?
Council meeting on the 2nd.
But it's going to be going now.
Yeah, we don't feel rushed at this point. I think the dialogue's really good for where we need to be, and we can get straight to action items that you can informally vote and say, let's put it in there, finalize, and we can get those presented back.
They're going to send it out. Okay. So we'll have, okay. Just
And-
a question, it wouldn't be a discussion.
With the fluctuating schedules, almost everybody's been able to take advantage of this. I would encourage you to either call, email, or come in, and let's keep looking at these items. I'll do like I've been doing, like Councilor Sutherland said, I make these notes throughout and put your initials by it, so I know we're addressing it. We did find a couple areas, talking to you guys, that we didn't transpose numbers correctly, and they didn't impact our overall numbers. We just moved something around on projections. So we'll be able to update things as soon as possible, and then we'll present it back to the entire group to consider, much like I've said with the council travel training budget. We'll send that to you separately so you can look at it, and then we'll make those changes.
And Josh, just as a personal press, Sandra, I don't have a way to print any of these materials, so if they do become available, can I just swing by and pick them up, a printed copy?
We'll print them for you, and we'll get them ready for you. Anyone wants them, just send me a text or an email, and we'll get it printed and have it ready for you.
Perfect, thank you.
I'll take it from you too.
If you pop open your book when we drive by, we'll put it into the binder for you and close it back up. It's the least we can do.
Okay.
Any other questions at this one? Okay.
We good? You guys good?
We're good.
All right, with that, I will call this special called meeting, we'll adjourn this special called meeting at 6, no, all right? 5:59, we did good. 5:59, I can't read a clock anymore, but I got distracted by the baby.
On at 6:30.
Excellent, thank you.